Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaming, feedism, and everything in its orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show one of our favorite guests. Today we've got Ash.
Ooh, hey Ash, welcome back, baby.
For everyone. Cool.
We're so glad to have you back. How you doing?
I'm alright. Yeah. A bit fresher today than last time.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, listen, we wanted to bring you back on because today is a very particular day in the Australian social calendar. It's a day commonly known as Australia Day, though in recent years has been going through a bit of a rebrand. It's been called something a bit different. I think some people these days are favouring Invasion Day as a bit more of a reference to the truth of this particular date. So to kind of kick things off, do you feel comfortable maybe for the listeners speaking to the true story behind the origins of what is currently known as Australia Day?
Yeah, sure. I thought maybe not to throw you under the bus, James. Maybe you could give it a quick go first. Because I'm going to make a point with this.
Please do. Use me.
Yeah. Why is it on the January 26th?
So my understanding of why it is on January 26th is because, and I do know that for a long time they couldn't agree on a date to place Australia Day, but they really wanted it because America has Independence Day, and they were like, we're cool just like our big brother. We should have a day too. And so there was like some umming and ahhing about days of import that might make sense to some people. And I believe the reason why January 26 was used is because it is meant to be the day that the first fleet landed at Botany Bay. Is that correct?
You did your research. I'm pretty impressed. Yeah. So yeah, it's not nice dab. For the listeners at home.
sorry, listeners, I did a dab because I'm a fucking loser. That's me and my brand. If you haven't figured that out already, but Ash, please, sorry, continue.
No. So it's my understanding, and I could, please don't, or fact check, but yeah, it's my understanding that it's on January 26th, which is actually a couple of days after the first fleet landed, but it's actually when I think the British flag was placed in Botany Bay. And I think that was delayed by a couple of days due to them arriving at a point that like the first fleet wasn't happy with. So they actually sort of moved to a different location in Sydney Cove. It's also for some Indigenous communities a survival day, which has also been commemorated for I think over like 80 years now, where there's actually ceremonies and memorials sort of held to kind of remember, I guess, the frontier wars and the impacts of colonization on different communities as well. And then there's also, I guess, a subset of people as well, which to a degree would say I'm a part of, would actually just probably like it abolished altogether. Because I guess there's probably, until like there's actually a degree of reconciliation done with our mobs and with Indigenous people, I think any version of Australia Day will kind of fail to sort of acknowledge, I guess, the dispossession and colonization of these lands. So, yeah.
What are some dates and times of the year that are of high importance for your mob?
We probably don't have a specific like pinpoint date, and it's kind of more to do with like a lot of, I guess, our kind of traditional ceremony or festivals have kind of been based on our seasonal systems, which are kind of very much environmentally triggered. So I guess back home, my favorite sort of festival is a festival that sort of celebrates the arrival of the whales. So for anyone who doesn't remember from the last episode, I'm from Grommr country, which is the islands off the southeast coast of Queensland, and specifically Minjarrabah. And we have a festival kind of in the winter time, so it's like hard to pinpoint exactly because like it sort of changes from year to year when the season sort of occurs. But it's just after the mullet season, which the fish kind of travel up to the island, and there's like a large amount of fishing, in which then the whales sort of arrive and sort of swim past the island. And there's normally it's kind of roughly falls in June, July. It can vary kind of year to year. But it's sort of a celebration of the whales sort of returning and kind of swimming past the island. It's been sort of changed how that kind of works. There's like often like sort of dance and ceremony. When I was a kid, there were like sort of a lantern festival that kind of coincided with it as well, that we used to all make like lanterns for, and that's sort of fallen away now a bit. But yeah, like the kind of dance and ceremony still persists all the day.
I mean, listen, I think it's funny you mentioned the celebration of whales, because is that not just called the Grommr these days?
Yeah, well, I was thinking that, yeah. Fat mammals, you know.
Celebrating the arrival of a bunch of fat tourists on the island, you know.
Yeah.
That's probably why they got rid of the dancing ceremony, because fat boys trying to move, you know, it's just like, you know.
Too much jiggling, can't handle.
Too much jiggling, can't handle, might sink the island, not preferable, you know, still gonna be there, no, but I love that. I love that there are days, and I think again it speaks to sort of like just the ways in which indigeneity is different to colonial ideas. It's like, we need a day that is of importance, that is the same thing on every calendar year because it's all about the Gregorian calendar. Whereas it's like indigenous folk be like, sometimes the whales arrive. That's pretty cool.
Sometimes they arrive like 6 weeks later.
Sometimes they come a little late. You know, it's like either way, we're gonna have a party. It's a couple of this is good food. That's basically it. While being indigenous by nature will carry similarities with being Native American and First Nations Canadian, I want to ask you, like, what is one major thing that you think is truly unique to the Indigenous Australian experience, separate to other Indigenous folk around the world?
Immediately in my head I was just like, we have Kathy Freeman.
I mean, she's iconic.
Like a sports star who's very low key as well. So like, you know, yeah, but amazing.
You know what though? Do you know what? I do think though, Kathy Freeman is one of the, at least from my perspective, one of the most important figures in like humanizing Indigenous people for Australia, because I feel like before Kathy Freeman, I can't think of a single Aboriginal person I would have seen on TV. But I know good and goddamn well that when she ran at the fucking 1992 Olympics, you know, she fucking came in first. You had Australia chanting her name. You had, and this is that thing, right? Like, I think Australia is similar to a lot of white nations where like people don't come out for like a lot of national things, but they show up for sports because apparently we're all about sports ball when we're going to slam dunk the kick ball over the hoop. I don't fucking know. But, you know, we love our sports, and Olympics is obviously huge. And so on the biggest stage with the whole world watching, an Aboriginal brown-skinned girl ran and won and took the gold. And when she did her victory lap, she held up the Australian flag and the Indigenous flag as well. And she ran with both. And to my mind, that is one of the most iconic Indigenous moments that we have. So, jokes aside, I think, yeah, Kathy Freeman.
No, definitely. Well, I think she paved the way. Like, it's like, I think the conversation starts shifting at that point as well, because it's kind of, you know, like a point which Australian culture comes to celebrate Indigenous excellence as well, and like undisputably as well. So it's like, yeah, I think it definitely, I think was a starting point to some of those changing conversations that, you know, people have been pushing for years before that, but just couldn't break through, I guess, the persistence of like the white Australian kind of mindset. So
yeah.
But I don't know, yeah, I guess I don't know what else.
Jessica Malboy,
she's pretty incredible.
For a great
Some
singer.
bangers.
Great singer.
Yeah. Miranda Tapsell is also a fave.
Yes. Oh my god. Also, have you seen her in Top End?
Yes. Oh, it's such a good film.
I think
Anyone treat yourself. It's like what's it called, Tourism Australia ad if it was a film, but also like quite endearing and sweet.
Though I do want to ask, maybe more pertinent to, it's January, it's this time of year. What is your mob doing normally this time of year?
I guess, I mean, it's summer up in Queensland. I'm probably stuck down here in Melbourne again. Probably working as well later today. Um, I have a very unceremonious day. When I have done something on this public holiday, I guess it kind of would be the kind of traditional sort of catch up with friends, maybe barbecue, hang out. But I also, I think more often lately, when I was younger, I would attend the rallies. Like, so there's often like protests in the city about changing the date that also sort of encapsulate other issues facing Indigenous mobs as well. But in the last couple of years, I've been either just working them or having a pretty low key one. Just hanging at home, cooking some nice food, relaxing, reflecting. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, certainly being a pasty skinned ginger, that's the height of summer, bitch. So, like my Australia Day, I'm cowering and hiding from the sun, who is my oppressor, and she is relentless. She will not rest until I'm roasted and fried and cooking on the side. So, that's my Australia Day, is smelling barbecues, wishing, a little bit like Little Mermaid, wish I could be part of that world, but I won't because I will die. So
Yeah, I was gonna
Is this
say,
a bigger holiday than, say, your Independence Day?
this is our Independence Day.
Oh, this is your Independence Day. But I thought
yeah.
that, so this is not when it became an independent country. It was when it was first.
No,
When's first?
because basically by the time all that happens, it's like the dates is just January 1st.
Ah,
Yeah, which is already a public holiday
yeah.
for New Year's. So
Yeah.
they didn't think that through.
So yeah, that's our technical date of being made a fully liberated country. The irony, of course, with colonization oppressors is not lost on me there.
Well, technically not. And so this is the thing, like, briefly touched on it, I think last episode around how much people don't know. So we became a federation then. So that's when all the states became a singular country. But I think it wasn't until like another 70 years that Australia actually got its independence from Britain as its own country.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of, and that's I think that's during winter, and I crunched the dates, and then I've like deleted that Word document that I had for those. Here we go. Yeah, that's the 3rd of March. So, end of summer, probably not as nice to actually have a day off. And in 1986, did we become an independent country?
Well, if you listen to the Hannah Gadsby special called Nanette, homosexuality wasn't decriminalized in Tasmania until 1997. So, I do want to ask curiously, like, what are your thoughts on the annual Australia Day ad the Meat and Livestock organization promotes?
I've always been a huge fan of them.
There.
As someone who very much eats meat, and it shows, I've always kind of quite enjoyed the production of them. I find them quite, I mean, I haven't watched one, I guess, in the last 2 years just because of life. But they're always kind of quite responsive to the political climate in Australia. So I think kind of normally like got their finger on the pulse.
They're quite camp usually.
Quite camp.
They're very camp.
The guy, the dude in it, Sam
Kekovich.
Kekovich. Yeah, I think was I'm not a very big sports people. I don't think James. I'm not a very big sports person. I don't think you are either, James. But I think he was a footballer or cricketer. Was some kind of big sports person back in the day.
He played sport.
And now he's the face of lamb for Australia. And kind of has these like sort of campy ads about like, how you've got to like put some lamb in the barbie, and how, it sort of plays on these like kind of larrikin Australian sort of tropes. Maybe we can link to one or two down in the description for the show so you can get a sense of them. But I've always been a fan because I've always thought him to be quite attractive as like an old daddy with a decent sized belly.
Yeah, I will say that's something unique to the Australian identity. We are simultaneously like big bellies are no bueno, but also if you're like this like conservative lad just drinking beer, you can have the belly out because that's just him. He's just saying it how it is, and clearly he loves a pint and a burger, but who the fuck cares? Because that's him. You know, it's a very interesting dichotomy that we walk
Yeah,
the line of there.
it can be quite jarring because it's sort of, I think it also comes from like a certain confidence that comes with that as well. Like the dude in like short shorts, beer, the gut, and like it's a particular sort of image. But I guess something which I've always found kind of conflicting is then that sort of works. I can be attracted to that kind of man, but then also sort of aware of like the cultural sort of aspect that kind of goes behind that. That's probably quite ex- ex- like excluding of kind of queer experiences and identities. And it's almost like I don't know, like I don't want to get all Freudian, but there's probably some kind of weird like daddy issues there that I don't want to deal with.
mm,
Or
no,
like a cultural sort of issue there that's non-resolved. Yeah.
no, I totally get it. I mean, I love the meat ads myself, and I think I totally agree. You know, you usually got quite a good finger on the pulse about these things. In fact, one in recent years, I can never remember his name, is the Aboriginal fella who did a lot of black comedy sketch. Um, but it's the one that happens on the beach, and it's the beach Barbie, and they're the ones that started off, and then you get all these random cohorts of people that wind up on the beach, and some dude pitches up, he's like, "Oh, how long have you been here for?" And he just goes, "Oh, I've been here since forever," you know. And there's a sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, leans into, an acknowledgement of as something. So definitely goes along that line. Um, I know you'd said
Stephen Oliver, I think. Was it?
no, because he's the bald. Because Stephen Oliver's the bald twinky one who did what's this in slut? Like he's that
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
No,
Also very good value.
uh,
Different one.
also black comedy sketch. What's this in slut? People go to YouTube. It's on there. It's fabulous. I cannot remember his name, but he's a really hot guy. He did on a news presentation once a really powerful poem about being seen as like the angry black man. And
Meanwhile, I think.
is that his name?
Yeah.
Quite possibly. Um, but it was a very powerful moment in the poem where he obviously starts off very in earnest, very very emotional, but then there's this moment of intentional anger where it's presented very angry. He's in your face in the camera doing it, and I have to say I was challenged on that because I actually felt myself recoil and go and go. But this is the point of it. That's the whole point of this piece is to challenge you on going. You
Yeah.
hear to a stereotype about an angry black man, and you go, "Oh, I must step back. This is fearful. I am fearful for my safety." But why?
Mm.
It was very interesting. So he's the one who does that in that ad, and it was really fabulous. So people go to YouTube, look on some Indigenous actors. They're all fantastic. Black comedy sketch. And seriously, if all you look at is what's this and slut, that's perfect. Go check that.
Pretty good day.
It's and I know you mentioned before, like you feel that without proper acknowledgement of reconciliation, that no future changed date could ever really work because it's always going to kind of carry a little bit of like not the best. But
Mm.
let's say we remove that for a second. If we're just talking about dates specifically, right? Is there a specific date that you think would actually make for a much more logical Australia Day to actually celebrate actually everyone?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I did some research into other dates that people were proposing. And they're all sort of around, I guess, key moments in Australian history. So like Australia becoming a federation. Um, there's a proposed date of like the 19th of January, which is like a reference to the year that Australia became a federation, to kind of move it off the 1st of January. The Australia Act, which is when we got our independence. Your favorite, I think, James, the May 8th, 8th May,
Yes, the 8th of
mate.
May, May 8th, May.
Yeah.
Like, it's comedy, it's pun, it's mate. Like, to my mind, if you are going to make a day that actually celebrates what Australia does do well and what every Australian does well, it's that kind of larrikin, stupid fucking comedy, and that date just holds it in its chubby little fist and jacks it off while fondling the balls nice and softly. So, to my mind, that's the perfect day. Also, I'm pretty sure nothing happens around that time in May, and I could use an holiday. So,
Well, I want it somewhere in summer, so it's like bring it, somewhere nice in summer, so I could just have a nice relax outside quietly. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I guess, while I would probably advocate personally for removing it or kind of really challenging or kind of reforming it. I guess it's thinking about who it's for. Like it's like maybe that's a public holiday for Australia or for Australians, but then maybe do Indigenous people like is there a different day that we could celebrate?
yeah.
And this is something which has been played with in certain workplaces as well, where there's options to maybe substitute that public holiday for a different day.
Mm.
So maybe a day for NAIDOC week, sort of acknowledges Indigenous survival and kind of achievements as well. I think there's other dates that could kind of be celebrated. And like I think for me personally as well is like this is maybe a space of like desettling, I guess, identity of Australia is actually maybe looking at what Australia is in terms of a migrant population and sort of if you desettle like the settler narratives that make up such a small minority of what Australia is as population, like is there a significant date in terms of like the migrant communities who have come here and actually made this country, or the refugee communities that have come here? And I think for me that's always been important as someone who has a lot of friends who are from those communities.
I mean, I think if I was the guy in charge, right, and I could just sort of say, right, this is a public holiday, this is not, da 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 da, got the magic fingers to make it happen. I'd make days for all of them. I think sometimes we limit ourselves to like, why can't you have more public holidays? Why can't you do this? I think it would be good to keep something happening on January 26th as like, like we've got Remembrance Day on the 11th of November, which is meant to be generically remembering everyone who dealt with war, and like we can do that.
I think that sort of comes. I think that would definitely be a possibility, but I think there's so much that would need to happen between
Happen first.
that. And so I think it's like, I guess a lot of states in Australia, I don't know about New South Wales because they've got a pretty conservative government, have for quite a while, but Victoria, Queensland, Tasmania, South Australia are all in the process of establishing treaties with their local mobs. I don't want to be shady, but I'm pretty confident in the South Australia will actually have a really incredible treaty due to the populations there. The way that colonization formed out, like a lot of communities are still grounded. They still have their language. They still have like direct ties to their culture in a way that haven't been disrupted in the same ways that the East Coast states have. But a lot of that treaty discussion is around truth telling and actually kind of doing the research and actually uncovering what the truth of colonization, what the history of Australia has been. And so I think once that's kind of established, then that might actually bridge the space to kind of go, well, when we actually understand our history properly, and we're not trying to maybe create like a revisionist or like a favorable idea of what Australia is, that we can actually kind of reconcile that. And then maybe January 26th can be a day that also can celebrate elements of Australia, but also remember and acknowledge other parts, and it can actually be a point where people can come together. But I do think there's like all that groundwork that needs to happen before that will be at that point. And I think that does create political, that requires a political shift of,
magnitude and things that
yeah,
things need to happen. It takes time.
So man at the top, change it.
Man top, it is. Just ignore that. So let's make it happen. Now to pivot more specifically to, I guess, because I'm fat and I'm hungry. Tell me about the food. So like when you do the thing of hanging out with mates and I guess doing the more like typical Aussie thing of like having a having some kind of get together on the day. What do you like to do food wise? Like, do you barbecue? Do you not? Like, what is the go?
Mine has always been, I guess, a barbecue sort of setup. So Eskies, tons of things to drink, tons of beer, a lot of like, I guess, kind of lamb, tons of sausages, just like a ridiculous amount of barbecue. And I was sort of thinking about like some of the other things you might be able to, I reckon you'd have to story around this, James, is like also then people bring like a lot of different things. They're all kind of like generic sort of like salads, um, potato salads to kind of supplement it. And a lot of like you can watch like the bitching between people as well, like on who's got the best salad. A lot of recipe stealing, like people trying to like deconstruct what someone else has made. A lot of running down. It's like insidious but lovely.
I mean, that was gonna
um,
be my next question. Like, with your mob, with your friends, like, is there that in-house drama about like who actually does the best snag, who actually like throws the best gig? Like, is that the conversation on the day? Do you partake in the shit, the
oh,
shade, the drama?
I escalate,
You
like
escalate.
maliciously. Yeah,
You
yeah.
maliciously escalate.
um,
Okay, I love
yeah,
that.
yeah. A lot of mine's kind of like like going between people and being like, I've heard this about your one. Like, what's the deal? Like kind of sussing out how everyone's like dealt with their food. Um, kind of being like, oh, someone said that yours is the best, and then like what someone get all like clear about how it is, but it's not. Um, Also the what's the other thing as well? I'm also always a fan of like the person who's like, oh, mine would have been the best, but I just got too drunk last night, so it's not.
There's
Or I've
always
rushed it this morning, so it's not.
It's not the best.
Um,
There's always one cunt who brings fucking Tim Tams and they're like, that's my job done. And it's like, fuck off, Michelle. Okay. Put some fucking effort in, babe. Though,
that's me. That's me every year.
okay, well, Michelle, you can get fucked. Put some effort in. I want, at the very least, a fucking potato salad, mate. Get it together. Though I will say, in any gathering for like Australia Day, and honestly, Christmas or any other family event as well, there's always one useless fucking dropkick who, like, you're getting assigned bringing the paper plates and the plastic cups and fucking cutlery. That's what you can do.
Give me that job.
Oh, fuck off. No, look at
I'm
this.
hopeless. I'm hopeless.
No, look at the size of you. I will absolutely put you to work. Thank you very much. Get in that kitchen. I expect you to know how to do a hot chook and a couple of salads. I expect you to know how to throw it all together, girl. Put it on the plate and get it out to the people. Look at the troops. They're dying out there. Get it going.
I could I could come through with the hot chook. That's probably about as best as I could do, which is literally just going buying a pre-cooked chook from the shop and then delivering. That said, I was gonna say my favorite food from like I guess Australian summer, and I don't know, like part of both sides of my family are pretty like cooked. So like Australian summer is generally like ridiculously hot. Christmas is ridiculously hot. January 26th is ridiculously hot. And so for Christmas, out both sides of my family still like to do like roast and all that kind of shit, and it's just absurd. Um, and I've always wanted them to like really embrace like the salad and like the kind of more like cooler sort of things because I just fucking love pavlova. I could eat pavlova for days.
Pavlova is good. I've got a great recipe for a vegan pav, actually. I shall recommend it to you. I quite like it. I like it. Sorry. I don't like it. When you turn my words about, I don't like it. No, we're not doing Pauline Hanson today, James. Stop it. God, fuck her. Oh, bitch. How is she still going?
She's having these revivals, and it's weird. I was like, you listen to things, and people think she's done, and then she comes back about 2 years later with more.
Yeah.
She's like a right wing politician, just relentless.
I want to ask you about the idealized future. In a future where those things have been addressed and dealt with. In a future where maybe the memory still lingers on in the not too distant past, but the work is really well underway, and we can maybe take a step back, more rest assured that things are going in that right direction, right? I want you to picture a quote unquote Australia Day in that period of time. And I want you to tell me what you want most out of a day like that. What do you want to see in that ideal day that actually celebrates and uplifts all of us?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think like it's interesting thing like the sort of imaginary sort of future and what things will be like. Because I guess I sort of wonder what the steps are between here and there as well, like, and what needs to change. And I think we've spoken a little bit to that. I guess it'd be like a day in which everyone in Australia can kind of come together and, you know, be grounded in, I guess, like an understanding of what Australia's history is, from the number of different perspectives and how Australia's kind of informed. What would you want, James?
More food.
More food.
You know, call me selfish. I think this really calls back to, and I think this is something I've also admitted on the podcast before. I think part of my gaining journey has really come to a love and adoration of cooking and the kitchen, the hearth, the idea of food and community. Like, we can just come together and be cool with each other. But I understand what you mean. It really does.
Well, I think
It does rely on that groundwork being laid down first.
yeah, but I think like that ideal is like potentially what that could manifest as well. Like a point where there's like not this idea that someone's somehow unfairly doing better than someone else, or like this distrust that I think the media sort of kind of push with an Australian narrative as well around the neighbor, but actually like yeah, the kind of celebrating coming together, especially in those spaces where like all your neighbors. And I think often where you kind of live around here, you do get to really sort of know your immediate neighbors who are sort of around you and have those connections. And
Yeah.
yeah, is part of that plan just though, James, to fatten up your like hot daddy neighbors?
I mean, I can neither confirm nor like my day of celebration is fucking World Obesity Day. Like every fat daddy getting just a little bit fatter, and every skinny daddy starting on that beautiful journey of obesity. And I'm there waving a chubby fist, like, yeah, have another cheeseburger. You know,
Seconds for everyone.
that's my political campaign. Seconds for all. Though I am curious, Tim, I know, of course, this conversation, and I think similarly to the last time we had Ash on, of course, being, so Australian focused, I think is primarily a conversation between the two of us. But I actually want to throw to you here. I think Ash has really shared with us some really interesting points on reconciliation and on political structure and on just so many different bits and pieces. I want to ask you, coming from a place where I think we hear a lot of this narrative from primarily, and where I think movements are already happening, let me pivot to you.
Mhm.
What do you want to see out of things like Independence Day, feast? What do you?
Well, for one thing, I, when it comes to something like, I mean, Thanksgiving, I don't necessarily have an issue with the title of the holiday because it was kind of invented in the 1950s. But I would like for them to stop telling the Sunday school version of how the holiday came about and quit pushing this ridiculous narrative about, the feasting with the Native Americans. And in terms of just the government of America doing better, the government really needs to recognize the systemic racism and oppression that has been so prevalent throughout our entire history. Just admit to it and then try to make it better. As far as the reparations thing, I'd love to see it happen. I don't think it's going to happen. There's going to be endless excuses about that, but I want the government to at least acknowledge how badly they have fucked up in the course of 200 plus years and really address it for the first time. And it just does not look like that is going to happen during my lifetime, but that's what I'd like to see.
And listeners, I know obviously every episode is about gaining, and we've touched a bit on that today, and maybe not as much as some others, but sometimes you got to talk about some important shit that isn't necessarily always to do with, the fat stuff.
Can I ask you a question, James? How are you spending today?
How will I be celebrating? I'm working. I'm working today. So my celebrating will be a cheeky drink after work, probably with leftovers, because I think we've got some in the fridge. But you know what? I think actually having this conversation, I wanna challenge myself this year to maybe try to listen into some Indigenous podcasts and maybe try to just engage with other content for the day and just to make that the focus and center myself around that, you know?
Mm. I've got my recommendations are Nikia Louie and Miranda Tapsell had a podcast. I forget the name of it, but it's like Pretty for an Aboriginal. No, I think that's the name of it. And they sort of interview like different like celebrities and like Aboriginal like artists on their sort of experiences, and it's always like a good listen to hear just different experiences.
Well, Ash, that brings us to the end of this wonderfully special episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can listeners find you online?
I'm under partychubbybears on Instagram, and yeah, find me there and then we can connect elsewhere as well. Would be my best.
No worries. Well, that's a wrap for now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on TikTok at Thicc Radio or at our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can reach us at anchor.fm/Thicc Radio/message. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Mads.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stannnum and Thiccy Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.